Today I'm talking to Latife Hayson. Latife is a top real estate agent at Golden Gate Sotheby's International Realty, selling wineries, vineyards, and luxury estates in Napa Valley. Latife's transactions are typically over $10 million. This is the first half of our interview. She talks to us about how she broke into the business through perseverance, authenticity, and integrity when most people would have given up. How she applies emotional intelligence, her secret sauce.
Thanks for listening to the Jere Metcalf Podcast, where top real estate agents tell how they do it. This podcast is to share knowledge for realtors and raise awareness for Give Back Homes, where real estate professionals work together for social good. Jet Centers Aviation, Bentley Atlanta, Legends Global, thank you for your sponsorship.
All right, everybody, it's the Jere Metcalf Podcast, where top real estate agents tell how they do it. And today I am so excited because we have Latife Hayson with Golden Gate Sotheby's International Realty. She specializes in selling wineries, vineyards, and luxury estates in Napa Valley of California. So tell us a little bit about yourself. And thank you, by the way, for being here. It's good to have you.
Thank you for having me, Jere. Well, I came from Australia in 1999, and my background there was in luxury marketing internationally, but actually working overseas in Asia, producing videos and marketing material to help developers sell and lease off the plan luxury properties and commercial properties in Sydney, Melbourne, and throughout Asia, parts of Asia. So I decided to move over here when I was 42 years old, and I.
So that was like last week or in the future. Seriously.
Thank you so much, love Jere. And then I worked in corporate America, which I did not want to do, but everybody said, look, you can't go up to Napa Valley, which is really where I wanted to be, because it's just a tourist. You know, it's all about wine and tourism. And my background was in television as an anchor and also luxury marketing. So I worked there for about a year, and then I thought, you know, corporate America is really for the birds. I'm not doing this anymore. I am going to move to Napa Valley, and I'm going to start a business, and I'm going to call it Managing for You. So the plan was to look after homes for people had a second home up here, third home, and oversee their build outs, their landscaping, construction, whatever, run their dogs, do their catering. Running the dogs was the best part. And so I started that business. And when I told my international CPA in San Francisco that I was going to do this, he said, you know, you really should get your real estate license because you're going to meet a lot of wealthy people doing this business. And from time to time, they're going to want to sell a property or buy a property. And I was like, over my dead body to do sales. Like I have never been fond of salespeople ever since I was a kid. And in Australia, real estate agents do not have, they have a bad reputation, as they do all over the world. Mm-hmm. And my observation was that most of them would sell their own mothers and buy them back again at a profit if they could. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't sell anything to save myself. And to this day, I still couldn't, really, seriously.
That's actually what makes you a good realtor, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But yeah.
And anyway, so I was very anti this. And so time went on, and he convinced me that I should do it. So I went through the process. I got my license, and lo and behold, at the end of it, I realized that you had to hang your license with a real estate firm. And I was mortified.
I love how you ready, fire, aim, right? You didn't even realize you had to hang your license somewhere. So,
yeah, no, I'm a road less travel less travel kind of girl. Everything in life.
Yes.
So I thought this is not going to work for me. But I interviewed with a couple of firms, and they said, "Oh no, you can't just hang your license here and do a deal every now and then. You have to come in and learn and work under a mentor." And I thought, no, that is just not for me. I am not doing this.
This is awesome. So, right. I love it. I kind of had a similar experience, and here we are, right? And how many years, what year was this?
I got my license in 2002.
Okay. So, yeah. So, and that was when I got mine. So we're on the same, we were doing the same thing. And finally we come together 16 years later.
I love it. And so anyway, so I was very fortunate. There was a woman working up here whose family, as an agent on her own, whose family had a very successful real estate firm down in San Francisco where she hung her license. And they said, no problem, you can hang your license with us. And I'm like, cool, I can just do whatever I want to do. And anyway, I was doing some catering at this particular property for 14 days straight. And one of the guys and his wife who came, he was in his early 80s at the time, old-timer here in the Valley, owned a big winery, built it back in the 60s or 70s. And he came over a couple of times. And one morning he calls me at 8 o'clock in the morning and he said, you know, honey, I've seen lots of women like you come to Napa Valley and they never make it. They all end up packing up and leaving. Oh. So I am going to be your manager. And I remember I was laying in bed. It was incredible. He woke me up. And I said, okay, cool. So he said, listen, I know so many vintners, they want to, they're always looking for wineries or vineyards. People want to buy, they want to sell. I'm going to introduce you to all the people I know. I was like, wow, cool, whatever. So I went along with him and he introduced me to all these different people. And sure enough, I started finding out about all these confidential properties, which they are all confidential for obvious reasons. You lose your staff, you lose your winemaker. People stop selling your wine if they think you're selling, right? Mm-hmm. So I would have them all sign confidentiality agreements, not allowed to tell anyone, and then we'd meet. And nobody would ask me any questions, which was fantastic because I knew nothing. But then I would have these old-timers, vintners, and they'd be asking each other questions about yields and farming and soil and, everything, rootstock, clone. And so I was like a sponge. I was just standing there for hours and hours every day listening to all of this and learning so much. So as time went on, I thought I literally hid between the sheets.
So, but as time went on, like how soon did you actually close a transaction as you're going through this process?
Well, that was part of the story. 9 months into it, I did. But you have no idea how many properties I actually brought together, buyers and sellers. But they would meet and they go, oh, so-and-so, he wants to say, I know him. We have dinner all the time. And so they would on my back. So I literally was hiding between the sheets the first 2 years. I thought, wow, this is so cutthroat. Yeah. So after 2 years, I thought, I've learned a lot. I do not want to do this anymore. This is ridiculous. And you can't.
But wait, now how many? So when did you say that? I've learned a lot, and I don't want to do this anymore. At what point? How many years?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years.
So you sold your first property at 9 months, and at your 2-year mark, how are you doing as far as your sales went?
I had no. All I was doing was vineyard wineries, but I wasn't getting paid. So.
Oh wow! But you were licensed.
I was licensed, but I didn't have a buyer broker agreement.
So you're just showing properties and hoping to get paid, and you're just keep getting. Gotcha.
Absolutely. They would call each other. It was awful. It was awful. So, wow. And you can't take on these are huge vintners, right? These are big entities. Right. So I just thought, this is not for me. This is the old boys club, and I'm just being used because I know all these different people. And vintners were calling me because they knew that I had other buyers. So I really got connected pretty fast. Anyway, so what happened was by then I decided that I was going to do luxury properties. Mm-hmm. I'm in a small town at the time of 5,000 people. Mm-hmm. And when I was trying to think about this last night, I think I started putting a little ad in the paper and saying that I was specializing in luxury estates. And I know that just set everybody off in this town. Like, really? This woman comes from Australia and she's just going to go straight into luxury sales, which there are hardly any every year, like maybe a handful at that time. Not that many more now either. And so that didn't go over so well with people, but I just decided that that's what I was going to do. Mm-hmm. And I believe that your dominant thoughts create your reality. So whatever you set out to do, if you believe it, it's going to come true. So very fortunately for me, it did come true. But I never really worked in an office because I hung my license with an office. And I hardly ever went there because I was doing a lot of confidential work, so I would just stay from home. So pretty much for most of the 15 years I've been in the business, I've worked from my home. And even when I was in Australia, I ran my business from my home, and I'm a very, very focused person. So it's never an issue for me.
You got to take us back 15 years ago, because you're 2 years into the business. You're like, this isn't for me. And then you put some luxury ads. But at what point, because now you're obviously selling wineries and vineyards and luxury estates, and you're a top selling agent at Sotheby's International Realty and at Golden Gate Sotheby's International Realty. So at what was the turning point? At what point did you go from, I'm giving up and this isn't working, to obviously you got into luxury sales. You figured out that was the path to go. But what kind of transpired to get you that traction to be successful? Because everybody's in your situation that's, or has been, but you were in a situation that was extreme to what most of us go through. So tell us exactly how you got traction.
I think the traction was really what I still do today, which I'm trying not to do anymore, which is 24/7. I literally work nonstop. And when you're working nonstop, it doesn't mean because you're with clients all the time. You're researching, you're learning. The kind of questions that get thrown at me by so many people, because I specialize in the second home market, those people have never, ever bought wine country property or country property before. And it's so complex, from wells to septic to setbacks to vineyards, the whole thing, because a lot of people want to have a little gentle vineyard as well. So I would be inundated constantly with questions. So I had to learn, I had to know the answers. And
well,
so
know
I
your
would
market. Right. So go ahead.
Only that, because I had been doing catering with all these really wealthy people that had second and third homes up here, I met all of their wealthy friends. And so I've never known anybody that is not a cash buyer, pretty much. I mean, very few people have I ever represented.
So here's what I'm wondering, and I bet everybody listening to this is wondering, is 2 years and no deals, and you know everybody and everything. Tell us how'd that first deal happen? What was it, and how did it happen?
Well, let me say this to you. I've only ever written to somebody and asked them if they wanted to sell their house once in my career, and I've only ever called somebody and said, would you like, are you looking for something? So the first one was a small piece of land. I had a friend up on a road that is now decimated from the fires, and I just love this road. And he said, oh, there's a bare piece of land across the way, and I think they're going to sell. So I wrote them a letter. This was my first deal ever. It was only, it was like $500 and something thousand, many, many years ago. I wrote a letter, and the woman wrote back. She was a psychiatrist, and she said, oh, there's myself and 4 siblings, and it's a really pretty rough deal with the family, but yes, we would like to sell. And they hired me. Well, boy, did I get thrown in the deep end. And so one brother who was very, an obstacle, he went on to the BRE and saw that I was a new agent, and he was giving me grief and whatever. It was a very, very difficult transaction. And I remember closing it, and the psychiatrist wrote to me, and she thanked me for being able to keep the deal together and manage so many different personalities and so much conflict. Wow. So that was my deal. Yeah. And then in 2004, I distinctly remember hearing from my friend on the same road that a woman who was quite well known in San Francisco wanted to buy a property. And so I actually called her. They gave me her number. I actually called her, and she called me back. And I represented her on a beautiful estate with 14 acres of vineyards. This is like probably, my second deal. And it was the highest residential sale. It would have been the highest residential sale, only it was $10,000 less than the highest residential sale. And it was $4,390,000. And that was the second highest that year.
And that was that was early in your career. You're already making the second highest residential sale. Yeah, so you manifested the luxury home specialist.
Absolutely. And then I did it again this year. And I think
that's
I did it
where
again.
I'm assuming that first highest sale. So your first sale gave you traction, and then you kept going. And obviously you've got some serious perseverance going on. And then you made the first highest sale. So now you have something to put your name on. And then it sounds like but a lot of it was relationships, patience, honing in on your skills, learning your lessons. And through those things, you were able to engage in some, and I would say, and you tell me, and we've got a lot of things that you've sent me that I want to tap on too, but it was the lessons learned and in your case, really, honing and focusing your craft that made you ultimately so much more successful than other real estate agents in our industry, because you really focused and honed in and worked hard and had perseverance and learned your market, which is so essential. What would you add to that, or what would you?
Well, what I would add to that was that both of these deals were unbelievably complex with problems that came up, particularly in the $4 million one. We found out just before close of escrow that there was a county road running through the property that we didn't know about. So when you're thrown in,
right.
Yeah. And the vineyard was leased for 20, 30 years. I mean, it's very, very complex. And so when you're thrown in the deep end and you have to learn to swim, and one thing I've always done, and it's just who I am as a human being. I always put everybody else first. I was raised that way. I'm one of 7 kids. My parents just ingrained that in us. And so my client, to this day, we're dear friends, and she's referred to clients, of course. My client recognized that her interests were always at heart. That was number one for me. To this day, she calls me for everything. Latife, it's time to, we're 25 years into the vineyard. Should I release it, or should I contract the grapes? Should I plant them myself? I mean,
that's great.
That's the clientele I've had since day one. To this day, pretty much everybody, I would say 90% of the people that I've ever represented are very much in my life. Some very regularly and some not so regularly, but they always come back to me whenever there's a challenge.
Well, I think for everybody listening, that's huge, because it goes back to what Jack Cotton said on our show a long time ago. He said, maybe I don't do you get everybody, they're the best at whatever. He said, I don't know that I always do the best CMA. I don't know that I always have the best marketing. I don't know if I'm even the best negotiator, even though he does a course on that. But I am always the best at knowing or guiding my client at what's best for them. And I would say you're not cold call. You haven't done any of that traditional stuff that you hear everybody do. It probably built more, resonated even better, and built more confidence in the relationships with your clients when you established and when you got them. So, I had a background in real estate. I bought my first piece of real estate when I was 20 years old. My father would occasionally flip homes. We have all that in our family, architects, etc. So I've been around real estate and sitting in boardrooms in Asia and Australia for major construction companies and developers. So it's not like I came in, I didn't know anything. Yeah. So here's something I'd love to talk about too. So, as far as the competence of you're dealing with transactions, you've got to know about setbacks and all of these things. All of us listening and me, those are all different in our market. The lesson there is know your market and be competent. And if you need to learn something, learn it. But on the flip side of that, I think there are plenty of situations where we know all of these things and deals still fall apart. And what I know about you, and what I'd love for us to all learn from you, is a little bit more about you when the I can cuss because it's a podcast, right? When the shit hits the fan or whatever. Anyway, beep it out, everybody. But when that goes down, it's not just the facts and the problem solving on that end, but it's also the difficult conversations with clients and handling emotions, and not, whether it's handling the emotions of your client, handling the emotions of the other agent, or handling the emotions of the other agent's client. So I would ask you to answer this in whatever way. Do you have a story that you want to share with us where that's happened and you've been able to use a little emotional intelligence to pull it together, or give us some insights on things to remember that are key when things do get a little intense, and it's emotions that so often get in the way of our transactions and also make us as real estate agents so valuable?
Yeah, I think for pretty much most transactions that I work on, they could all easily fall over. And we all know that many times we have to save our clients from themselves.
Yes.
So because I work with high net worth individuals, they have a tendency, more so than people who don't have a lot of money, to be difficult, be aggressive, be cutthroat, not They don't understand the art of negotiation. It's all about winning.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the ways I would say to you, firstly, there are agents that often can blow a deal up, because I always say, we've had these conversations, never take on the personality of your client. Because if you have a difficult client and they're lawyering up and they're aggressive, and you take on that personality, which I have seen sophisticated agents do, it becomes a real problem.
Our job is to do the opposite of that, is to buffer that.
Right. So what I say is, when I have a client, whether it's a buyer or a seller, and my client's very difficult, I will say to the other agent, listen, I've got a really, really difficult client, and you're going to be really annoyed at me from time to time when I come to you with things that they want me to say. So can we please have a pact now before we move any further, and know that you're never going to get mad at me, I'm never going to get mad at you, and we are going to get this across the finishing line, because without us working as a team, this is not going to happen, I'll tell you right now. And sometimes
that. Yes,
and
love that.
On big deals, you have a really difficult client and I have a really difficult client, and God knows there's no way this is getting across the line. Right. We have to save clients from themselves. So there are some strategies with that. Like sometimes I'll say, listen, okay, I'm going to write you an email knowing that you're going to pass it on. Mm-hmm. Now, we're not doing anything breaching our fiduciary duties or whatever. We are just managing people's emotions. Well, good cop, bad cop.
Well, you're helping,
right?
and I would tell you it's helping. A lot of times the clients need help understanding the situation, and it needs to be articulated to them. And sometimes it needs to be a little more than what just we're saying, but we need to show them something. I mean, I've had clients ask me to show them something, and sometimes if they ask for advice, but if you can show them and help them understand where that advice is coming from, it makes it a lot easier to decide how to take it. Or, and I don't always, you tell me, I don't always give advice. I give, here's the reality, here is the situation, here are the options, and here are the likely outcomes. And, because sometimes they say they want one outcome, and that's only because they don't understand the other potential outcomes or the consequences of a certain decision. Does that make sense? I mean, I think I'm kind of reflecting on what you're saying. So, but just help everybody apply that to our deals and our business.
Yeah, and I actually say to my clients, I mean, my favorite clients are the really successful ones who are so good at what they do. That's why they have all this money to buy a second home or a winery, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. They research and choose a broker, a real estate broker, a lawyer, a stockbroker, and then they take their advice. That client to me is just a dream, because they do not look sideways without me. Even if they want to write an email, they'll have me edit it. And these are the smartest guys. I mean, they could lap me in assets, right? Mm-hmm. I love working with people like that. I do have a great story of, it was the highest residential sale in the history of Napa Valley until last year. It was matched last year at $15 million, and it was surpassed by another $2 million at $17 million. But when I did it in 2014, it was the funniest story, because I had this, there was an auction that was going to take place here. And the property had been on the market for many years, starting at 22, 18, 16. And it stopped at 16 after many, many years, and they decided to take it to auction. And I'm pretty good on my numbers. For some reason, I deconstruct sales, because we have no such thing as price per square foot in wine country until you deconstruct and get down to the actual construction of the structure and take out all the other components. Anyway, I thought that this property would sell for $8 million. I was convinced it would. So I was being introduced to this guy from Florida who had just started, told somebody that he's interested in looking. So we had a couple of conversations on the phone, and he said, I'm going to fly out for one day, because I don't really know Napa that well. I'm going to fly out on a private plane with my crew, and we're going to go around, and you're going to show me some comps and this property, and then I'll be getting back on the plane at the end of the day. I'm like, cool. So we go, I set it all up, and I put on the list all these other properties that are 16, 20 million, whatever. And we go to these other properties, no. And then we get to this one that's 15, that was it was 22 million. It's 22 million. And we're walking up the stairs, and he looked back at me and he said, "Why did you bring me to this house?" And I said, "Because it's a comp. You'll see that that's great for 8 million if you can get that for 8 million." And he goes, "But I want this house." And I said, "You can't have this house. And by the way, you got to hurry up. We just keep moving, will you?"
Oh, this is a good story. Yeah.
It's an amazing story, actually. And he was a very funny guy. And so we get back in the car, and he said, "Okay, hotshot, you're going to show me how good an agent you are. I want this property, but I'm only going to pay $12 million.
Oh, my gosh. Right.
I said, "That is just not going to happen."
This isn't what I had in mind, right?
This is not what I had in mind. Anyway, long story short, the time comes, he sends me off to the auction, but he is in love with this other property. And of course,
I'm in love with the one listed for $24 million.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
He's in love with the one for $22 million, and he had told me he wanted to buy a property because it was in foreclosure. So I said to him, "Listen, you're not going to get that property." I knew he had so much money, more money than God. I said, "You can't afford it. Let's move on." And of course, he thought that was hilarious.
Now, did he know that you knew? Did he know that you were making a dig? Or?
Oh yeah,
good. I love it. I love it.
I'm fun to work with. We laugh all day. And so I tease him. So anyway, he sends me off to this auction. I can't even tell you about the auction. It was so funny. It's a whole other podcast. But there I am bidding on his.
Yeah, I do want to talk about auctions, but I want to hear the story first. Yeah.
Yeah. He wants me to do his bidding for him, and I'm like totally panicked. So I say to the auctioneer before it starts, I said, "Listen, my client's in Florida. I'm going to be on the phone. I'm not used to doing this. What if I can't get my hand up quick enough or what?" He says, "Well, bad luck." And I was like, wow, that's pretty aggressive. So we get there. I'm on the phone, and it's coming down. And I said, "Do you want to make a bid?" No. And it gets down. And they said, "Latife, what are you doing?" The auctioneer says, "We're going to stop." "Latife, come on with your client." They stopped for a half an hour and wanted me to try and figure it out with my client. My client says, "No, go and find the agent." He knew the listing agent was at this auction, and ask her if I'm going to get that other property for $12 million. I said, "For God's sake." He said, "Go and do it." So I said, we all stopped. I grabbed the other agent and I said, "What is it going to take to get that other property?" Anyway, meanwhile.
Smart. This is smart, by the way. Yeah.
Back to auction. The hammer comes down. Wasn't my hand. $8 million. $8 million. Wow. I was right on the money. And he wasn't sorry about it. Anyway, the next day it actually fell out of escrow, believe it or not. The seller was so happy to let the buyer out of escrow when the buyer's wife didn't want to buy it. So meanwhile, we go back and he makes an offer on the other property. $17,250,000 with all the furniture. Had millions of dollars of
so
furniture.
He came up from his 12.
Came up from his 12.
Yeah.
There were a lot of come to Jesus talks on the phone, I can tell you.
Well, I want to talk about come to Jesus talks, but first, we'll hear the rest of the story first.
So anyway, he makes an offer, $17,250,000, $2,050,000 for furniture and art. I said, "Listen, you don't want the furniture and art." He goes, "I do." I said, "Trust me, you don't. Let's put in an offer for 15 without it." "No, all right. We go in for $17,250,000. We're going through all the due diligence. And he says, "I better fly in to see this property. I've only seen it once and I was looking at it as a comp." I said, "Yes, you had better get yourself here." So he comes in with his whole crew and we're walking around and we had it all booked to go back the next day as well. Mm-hmm. And after many hours, he comes up to me and he puts his arm around me. He goes, "Honey," and I went, "Oh my God, I know what's coming." He said, "Honey, you and I are going to be friends forever. But this house is not for me. This is just not how."
Oh my God, are you kidding me? So I see where this is going. This is great. Yeah.
He said, this house just is not how I live. It was Tuscan, very, very authentic Tuscan, 3 stories, and the agents didn't turn on the lights when we came back. So it was a little like a dungeon.
Everybody turned the lights on for your showings. So anyway.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
They thought it was in the bag. So there were 4 listing agents, but 3 were active. So the wife, it was a divorce. The wife had 2 agents that were partners. The husband had 2 agents that were partners. And then there was me.
My goodness.
There's a lot. Yeah. No, I won't tell the rest of that. But anyway, so I said, okay. So everybody's just totally flat. We go out for dinner, an early dinner, and he said, what else is on the market? I'll just build my own property. And I said, listen, there's no land on the market. So I sat with him and I showed him MLS and see, there's nothing. And he said, if you can try and pull this off, at $15 million, I might consider it. So I leave the restaurant.
He just likes to see what you can pull off. I mean, so let's see what happens. So keep going.
He plays me still all the time. So I go outside, and one of the listing agents, she had never liked me. I'm her competitor in the same office, right?
Rival.
And
right.
So I called and I said, listen, don't shoot the messenger. Here's the deal. He's falling out of escrow. And I said, how are we going to pull this together? He's saying
everybody in Atlanta, falling out of escrow is out of contract. So go ahead. We call it under contract, but go ahead. Yeah.
So anyhow, somehow I can't remember the details of it, but I said, how about we do this? Can you get your sellers to accept an offer of $15 million and no furniture? Well, they came back and we got it back into escrow. We got it back in contract. It literally.
Right. And most people say escrow, so go with your language. Yeah. We just have a lot of Atlanta listeners, but anyway.
There's a lot more to this story, which is unbelievable, which I haven't got time to get into. But ultimately, we, weeks later, got back into contract at $15 million, and we closed it. And this agent that didn't like me said to the other agents, I've got to give it to Latife. She really knows how to keep a deal together. And it really is about really taking your client's interest. Like, I wasn't interested whether we sold him that or not, because I knew that one day he'd buy something else. But once we figured out what the issues were and what he could do to make the house his own, and he didn't want the furniture anyway. He got there. He said, why was I buying this furniture? I said, exactly. We just saved $2,500,000.
Wow.
So I think what it is for me, no transaction is going to change my life, and I don't rely on transactions to pay my bills. So when you're not, when you don't care about the commission, what you care about is your reputation, and that you have a friend for life.
Well said.
Will rave about you and send you business. That's golden to me.
You're exactly well said. Isaac better be taking notes on this and putting them up on the comment board. You well said. So I want to say something to everybody listening and between us and as real estate agents. I think it's so common. Somewhere along the path of being an agent, people start taking clients for granted, or it starts getting very easy, unfortunately, for people to complain about situations and complain about clients. And the difference between most agents and the highest caliber agents, such as yourself, Latife, is that you understand that to do that would be to not do your job and to not appreciate your job. And when you take it it's just so not about you, and it's all with a smile on your face, because this isn't for you. This isn't for your commission. This is for your client, and you do it in a way that you didn't just decide, okay, that's how it's going to have to be, but that's really who you are, and you own it, and you live it, and you do business that way. Not only does your enjoyment of your career and your life become exponentially better, but so does the value you offer and your client's experience with you, and hence how I think the message here, and it's something that I'm always on I've apparently become on a mission to do this, is to say, guys, it's not about making 20 cold calls a day. It's not about like pushing people until they buy a house. It's about finding your value, which you have clearly done. And when you've got that value and you present it and you deliver it in that positive, happy to do it way, there's a more articulate, elegant way to say that, but it will just come. The world will give you what you give it. That's what you've given the world. And look at these friendships and these clients that some people would say, oh, he ran me in circles. Well, yeah, I mean, that's why you're there. Anyway, I'm going on, but I want to really drive that home on even the whole process you went through and the circles. it was literally a joy for you. And that's how it should be for all of us, or we shouldn't be doing this. So that's it. Done with my lecture. I love that.
One of the things that has really amazed me in my career is that I probably should have been fired, many, many, many times, because I would say that and I talked to my broker about this. I talked to Bill Bullock about it.
Uh-huh.
Apart from the
Shout
fact
out
that
to Bill Bullock. But yeah, go ahead.
Apart from the fact that I have no idea how to close, and I'm hopeless at listing presentations. I'm pretty much used to just referrals, but occasionally I do have to do a listing presentation, and I don't know what other people do, but I'm sure it's not what I do, which isn't much.
We want to hear about that. But go ahead. But finish this first.
For my entire 15 years, I have tried to talk people out of buying things they tell me they love. So they come here, they've never been, they really haven't ever bought wine country property before. Mm-hmm. And I know how fantastic wine, I know how fantastic wine properties are. Mm-hmm. And some are just, they're okay. And new people might go, oh, this is great. I go, no. So I would say many, 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 many times I was fully expecting someone to say, you know what, you're just not the right agent for us. Because they would say, we love this house. And I go, trust me, you don't. No. My wife and I have talked about it. We had dinner last. This is the property. And I said, please, I'm begging you. Can you just give me a little more time? We'll go and see some more properties. I have had this over and over and over again. And so I do a lot of entertaining in my home with all my clients. Mm-hmm. And there's many times we sit at the dinner table and everybody goes, how did you meet? Oh, she represented. And you're not going to believe when we first met her, they all have exactly the same story. And I often wonder, why didn't they fire me? Because I'm pretty opinionated and literally sometimes beg them not to buy.
And what would you say the answer to that is?
Well, in the end, I don't know what it is, but in the end, they always bought something else, and they're so grateful, every single one of them, that they didn't buy what they thought they loved. But why they stuck with me was probably because I think probably why I've been able to, be successful in the business is because they know that I'm trying to talk them out of buying something, and that means talking myself out of a commission. So that's what a lot of their testimonials say. She always has your best interest at heart, even if it means losing a sizable commission. So I think that's golden to them, and they recognize it, and they're not expecting it when they're working with a real estate agent, I think.
Exactly.